If Willis Whitfield was unresponsive as a child when his mother told him to clean up his room, he's since made up for it. Whitfield, a Sandia National Laboratories physicist, is the inventor of the laminar flow clean room. And Whitfield died this past fall at the age of 92. But without his invention, everything from a cell phone to a hospital surgical suite wouldn't work quite as well as it does today. His NMAF producer, Matt Grubbs, with Sandia's Gil Herrera.
Well, Gil Herrera, thanks for coming in. And as we were talking before, a lot of people have no idea that the clean room was invented just a few miles away from where we're sitting right now.
Well, as you know, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the issuance of the patent for the clean room. And unfortunately, I want to make sure I mention this, Willis Whitfield passed away about 3 weeks ago. And so this has kind of turned into a celebration of, good engineering accomplishment in true tradition of what we like to do at Sandia. But what the need was is contamination that was impacting mechanical and electrical components that Sandia was developing, for their multiple missions. And the innovation was quite simple when you think about it. What Willis did was put together a number of relatively simple components, HEPA filters, which existed at the time, the notion of sealing off a room and not letting outside air get into it, and a number of fans and pumps, but did it in a way that would take advantage of gravity. And what he was able to accomplish is, if you look at ambient air, there's about 3 million particles in it that are larger than about 1/400th the width of your hair, about a quarter micron. Wow. And in the clean rooms of the day, by the methods they use, they'd get it down by about a third of that, about 1 million particles. What Willis was able to do in his first room was get that down to between 500 and 1,000 particles. So it was a factor of 1,000 improvement in the performance of what had been done in the past. Today, of course, we get it down to 1 particle per air, and in fact, Willis achieved that within a couple of years of the invention, sure, using these simple methods.
One of the first applications was medical, at least as used by the outside world, the world outside Sandia.
Yes, and in fact, a big part of our mission, of course, at Sandia, we are a government entity, is to serve the public good. And so anytime we have an innovation that could benefit the public, it's part of our mission to disseminate that information. And so Willis immediately published, we filed a patent in 1961, I believe, and it was issued in 1962. But he also began publishing the work. And you mentioned the skepticism we had when it worked so well. There was an even greater skepticism among the community, and nobody believed the results until they repeated them. And as soon as people saw the great impact, effectively eliminating particles, one of the early adopters was in healthcare. And MD Anderson, I believe, was the first to use it because the average size of a bacteria falls within the size, and a bacteria is a couple of microns, so it's about 1/50th the width of a hair. And that falls within the range that can be easily filtered out. And so it was in leukemia treatments where some of the treatments kill off your immune system. Sure. If you could eliminate bacteria from their recovery rooms, then that would greatly improve their ability to survive the treatment. And also doctors began realizing if we could use these methods in operating rooms and you could eliminate bacteria from operating rooms, that would solve the age-old problem of, they survived the procedure but died in the recovery.
Right. And I read that clean rooms aren't necessarily sterile, that they would need to be sterilized, and then you're filtering this air a number of times a minute, recycling the air.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, what you don't want to have happen then is to clean off an operating table and then have several 100,000 bacteria per minute falling on the operating room itself. And so the way a clean room works is it removes pretty much all the particles from the air by a continual flow. In the case of Willis's original room, it exchanged air 10 times a minute. But one of his innovations was that you can exchange air 10 times a minute and only have the airflow be about 1 mile an hour. And so, people thought it would bother a worker, but it doesn't.
Their hair would be blowing, and papers or whatever they have in there.
but at a 1 mile an hour, it didn't impact them, but yet it exchanged the air 10 times a minute, and that way you could, clean out a room. The other innovation he had is that if you let the room stabilize, so, do the conventional cleaning, with, alcohol and chlorine and other kinds of cleaning methods and vacuuming, then you run the room for a few minutes and it removes the airborne particles, and the notion that you clean the air before it goes in the room will continually keep it at that clean rate.
How quickly did that take off then in the outside world when we're thinking, we're working on getting to the moon, it's the birth of really sort of microelectronics, that must have just jumped off.
It took off tremendously. In fact, it was estimated by Sandia at the time, again, this is by 1968, that the actual industry of building clean rooms was $50 billion. Right now it impacts industries that are worth trillions of dollars. And so it was revolutionary to that whole industry. And there's not an integrated circuit today, any component for your iPhones, iPads, none of for the internet. All of those circuits are actually manufactured in clean rooms. The space launch, imagine if you launched a satellite, or in the case of what we were doing in the 60s, preparing to go to the moon and put people in orbit. If you had particles floating around, they could short out the electronics and circuitry. So the entire Apollo program and the predecessors, the Gemini and Mercury programs, were done in clean rooms.
Laminar flow, which is everything flowing one direction essentially, it can be done on a huge scale. That kind of technology, being able to create an entire factory floor or floor of a building that's a clean room, did that come as quickly afterwards? Where people realized they could do it on a large scale? Yeah,
that actually came fairly quickly. Like if you look at the history of the semiconductor industry, the factory that I have the privilege of managing at Sandia, our two clean rooms are about 100,000 square feet, roughly on the inside, and that would have been small by even the standards of the early 1970s.
Wow.
So by the 1970s, companies like IBM and Texas Instruments and Motorola, were building, factories that were greater than 100,000 square feet. Today, companies like Intel and some of the foreign fabs like TSMC have clean room areas, when you include the broader area, that are really approaching and exceeding 1 million square feet.
One of the important parts about this was sort of an early form of tech transfer, being able to take something that you did to the lab and give it out to the world. And say, hey, look what we did, kind of a thing. That's become a more important part of what you do, it sounds like.
It has. It's always been an element, but since the legislation allowed us in the mid-'80s, it really gave it a mission assignment. It's been increased. But there are basic scientific advancements that are part of our mission and fundamental research, that get licensed, as well. And there are times when there are national needs where we innovate. A more recent one there is something called Stingray, where this is back in the 90s, an inventor who was working more on research with the Department of Defense came up with the notion that you might be able to disable a mine with a burst of water. So instead of putting something that might cause it to detonate, could you dud it by hitting the detonator with a burst of water? And the early generation of that was used to disassemble the mine or the booby traps that Ted Kaczynski left, and then and so as that matured as a technology, it's now used in Afghanistan, to help disassemble IEDs.
When Willis Whitfield started to come back to the labs, it sounds like a few years ago, it seems like he was pleasantly surprised by what was going on there.
Surprised, but also very humble. And I had the privilege of giving him a tour when he turned 90. On his 90th birthday, we had him back, and he brought, I think, 30 of his closest friends. And what I did is I peeled Willis off and took him and his wife and his son on a tour, not of the technology, but actually of the kind of the bowels of the clean room, where all the fans are and the filters, and because a clean room is a 4-story building. There's a lot of infrastructure with it. And first off, I do a lot of tours. He stumped me more than anybody else. I had a facilities manager there because he still was, up on the game of the details of how a clean room worked. But when I talked to him about how, his contribution, he was very humbled. He grew up during the Depression on a cotton farm. He always had a strong, inkling to want to serve the nation, as really everybody at Sandia does. And he was humbled by the impact that he had. And while he could have been better that, today investigators who invent things at national labs can share in royalties. He was of an era where there were no royalties. He was just proud that very quickly people could benefit from it. In fact, it was interesting. The thing he was most proud of wasn't so much the mission work at Sandia that benefited, but the fact that the healthcare industry was able to pick up, and you can actually measure directly lives saved, by the fact that people going through leukemia treatments and through surgeries, wouldn't have to deal with secondary infections. They could just focus on getting well from what the doctor was trying to solve, and that made him the most proud of what he shared with me a couple of years ago.
Gil, thanks so much for your time and for sharing that little bit of history with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.